All right, today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and honestly one of the most mind-bending ideas in all of philosophy. It's called the ontological argument. It's this incredibly bold attempt to prove that God exists using nothing but pure, clean logic. So the big question is, can you actually think something into existence? Let's get into it.
I mean, think about that for a second. At its core, that's what this is all about. Can an idea, a concept just floating around in your head, be so flawless, so utterly complete that its very perfection means it has to exist out there in the real world? It's a puzzle that has kept some of the world's greatest thinkers busy for, well, centuries.
So, to get this whole story started, we have to go way back. We're talking the 11th century. Our main character is a philosopher and a theologian named Saint Anselm of Canterbury. And what's interesting is, he wasn't really trying to win some debate with skeptics. He was actually just exploring his own faith using reason. And in the process, he came up with a proof that would literally echo through philosophy forever.
Okay, this right here, this is the absolute key to everything. This is Anselm's famous definition of God. And you got to pay close attention to the wording. It's not just the greatest thing you can think of. It's a being so perfect, you literally cannot even conceive of anything greater. It's the absolute top, the ceiling of perfection. Keep that definition locked in your mind because the entire argument balances on it.
So here's how Anselm lays it all out. Step 1. We can all imagine this being, right? This being than which nothing greater can be conceived. So, okay, it exists as an idea in our minds. Easy enough. But now, here comes the big move. In step 3, Anselm says that something that exists in reality is obviously greater, more perfect, than something that exists only as an idea. I mean, a real $1 million is better than an imaginary $1 million, right? So, if the most perfect being you're imagining only existed in your mind, it wouldn't actually be the most perfect being, would it? Because you could imagine an even better one that also exists for real. So, for the definition to hold true, this being must exist in reality. It's this wild leap from an idea in the mind to a fact in the world, all based on that one definition.
But, you know, it didn't take long for someone to challenge this. And the first big challenge came from a fellow monk, a guy named Guanilo. He thought Anselm's logic was, well, it was clever, for sure, but he kind of felt like something was off. He thought, hey, if this kind of reasoning works, what else could we just think into existence?
Guanilo's response was honestly a brilliant bit of trolling. He basically said, okay, if this logical engine you built is so sound, let's see what happens when we apply it to something else. You know, something kind of ridiculous. He wanted to test the argument's limits. So Guanilo came up with this amazing counterargument. He said, all right, I could imagine a perfect island, an island in which no greater island can be conceived. You know, it's got the perfect weather, perfect beaches, free snacks, the whole deal. So following Anselm's logic, since a real perfect island is way better than just an imaginary one, this perfect island must therefore exist. And this just perfectly exposes the potential problem, right? We all know that there's no magical island that's guaranteed to exist just because we can imagine it. So Guanilo says there must be a flaw in Anselm's original logic.
So for hundreds of years, philosophers went back and forth on this. Then, in the 18th century, the philosophical heavyweight Immanuel Kant steps into the ring, and he delivers what a lot of people think is the argument's final, devastating knockout blow. To really get what Kant is saying, let's start with something really simple. Forget God, forget islands. Just picture an apple. What are its properties? You know, what makes it an apple? Well, it's red, it's round, sweet, juicy. These are all the qualities that make up our whole concept of what an apple is.
And right here, this is Kant's killer question. If I tell you that this apple exists, have I actually added a new feature to the concept of the apple? Does saying it exists make it any more red, or more round, or more sweet? And Kant's answer was a very firm no.
Kant used this now famous example with 100 thalers, which was an old German currency. He said, look, the idea of 100 thalers in my mind has the exact same properties as 100 real thalers in my pocket. Both are made of silver, both have a specific design stamped on them, both have a defined value. The list of qualities is identical. Existence, Kant argued, isn't a property on that list. It's not a feature of the thalers. It's just the fact that they're real. And this totally cuts the legs out from under Anselm's step 3. If existence isn't a great-making property, then a real being isn't logically greater than an imaginary one. It's just, well, real.
Now, you would think that after a takedown like Kant's, that would be the end of the story. Game over. And for a long time, it pretty much was. But in the 20th century, the argument got a reboot. Philosophers with brand new logical tools decided to give it another shot.
One of the biggest names here is the American philosopher Alvin Plantinga. What he did was, he took a very sophisticated type of logic called modal logic, which is basically the logic of possibility and necessity, and he used it to reframe Anselm's original idea in a way that just might sidestep Kant's famous critique.
Okay, so Plantinga's version has a few moving parts. First, you have possible worlds. Just think of it like any different way the universe could have turned out, like a world where you had cereal for breakfast instead of toast. Then there's maximal excellence, which is just having all those classic perfect qualities, all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly good, and so on. But here's the masterstroke, maximal greatness. That means having maximal excellence not just here in our world, but in every single possible world.
So here's the logic, and it's a bit of a trip. Plantinga argues that if it is even logically possible for a being with maximal greatness to exist, then that being must exist and exist necessarily. Now why? Well, think about that definition. A maximally great being has to be perfect in every possible world. If it existed in some worlds but not others, it wouldn't be maximally great, right? So by definition, if this being is possible at all, it can't just be a maybe, it has to be a certainty existing everywhere. And with that, the whole debate shifts to a new question. Is the very idea of a maximally great being even coherent and possible to begin with?
So here we are, after 1,000 years of proofs, perfect islands, and possible worlds. Where does that leave us? I mean, why are we still so fascinated by this argument? It's definitely not because it's settled the question once and for all.
The real, lasting power of the ontological argument isn't about whether it works or fails as a proof for God. Not really. Its true genius is in the deep, fundamental questions it makes us ask. Like, what is the connection between pure logic and cold, hard reality? Can our language ever perfectly capture the world? What does it even mean for something to exist?
And that's really the question we're left with. Is this whole thing just a clever but ultimately flawed word game, a kind of philosophical dead end? Or is it something much more profound, a puzzle that uses the biggest idea imaginable to probe the absolute limits of our own thoughts and the nature of reality itself? In the end, that's the mystery the ontological argument leaves us to ponder. Thanks for tuning in.